First, Calvinists evangelize for the very same reason everyone else evangelize. God commands it. Calvinists read and understand the Great Commission in the same way that Christians have understood it for 2,000 years. They have the responsibility to declare the glories of Christ to those who do not know Him. Even if their theology makes it difficult to understand why Jesus would command us to do this, it would not excuse us from obeying His command to do this. Second, their theology does not, in fact, make it difficult to understand why Jesus would command us to evangelize. Rather, it explains it. Calvinists believe God is sovereign over the entire process of salvation, from the very beginning to the very end. This means He is not only sovereign over electing whom He will save, He is also sovereign over electing how He will save. And He has sovereignly chosen to save His elect through everyday people proclaiming His gospel. Just as Jesus says,
"No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them, and I will raise them up at the last day."
The Bible also says,
"How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them?"
In other words, God not only sovereignly draws His people to Himself, He also sovereignly sends us to preach to those He is drawing. For the Calvinist, then, the dilemma of why a Calvinist would need to evangelize just simply does not exist. Their theology tells them that they need to evangelize, because that is how God saves His elect, through the preaching of the gospel. Third, Calvinists evangelize because it brings them joy to speak of the Lord who loves us. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "I think we delight to praise what we enjoy, because the praise not merely expresses, but completes the enjoyment." He goes on to explain how we are compelled from within to share our delight in a new author or a grand view of nature with others, just as we are inwardly driven to speak about our favorite restaurants and TV shows. We complete our joyful experience of each of these things by sharing them with others. How much more so is this the case with the God of the universe who loved us, predestined us to be His through no merit of our own, and redeemed us for Himself at the cost of His own Son. Thus, even if we had no theological motivation to evangelize, which they do, we would do it because of our emotional motivation. We love to talk about the God who loved us. Fourth, those who hold to a Calvinistic theology generally testify that far from hindering their commitment to evangelism, adopting this theology actually multiplied their commitment to evangelism. Knowing that God will draw His people to Himself relieves them of the pressure of trying to attract someone to Him with the beauty of our words, the power of our speech, or even the righteousness of our lives. Instead, they can present the gospel to the best of their ability with the confidence that the success or failure of their evangelism does not rest in their performance, but in the irresistible grace of God. This produces a courage to present the gospel even to those who seem most opposed to it, because they have the assurance that God's irresistible grace can overcome even the most hard-hearted resistance, and if it does not, they know it is not the result of some failure on their part. In addition to increasing their confidence, many will say that adopting a Calvinistic theology has given them increased gratitude, that produces more passionate and more consistent evangelism than they had before. This is not to say that an Arminian cannot be equally or significantly more motivated than a Calvinist. Many are. It is to say that when you embrace a theology that tells you God is even more responsible for your salvation than you previously thought, and that you are even less responsible for it than you previously thought, you cannot help but grow in gratitude. In many cases, that growing gratitude causes simultaneous growth in public praise and personal evangelism. The idea that Calvinism hinders evangelism is based on a misunderstanding of what Calvinists actually believe, and simply does not hold up against the evidence of real life.